Well, good afternoon, everybody. I can have your attention. Welcome to Residents Present. And today we have the great pleasure of having Helene and Alan Kanegsberg present. And they're going to present about one of their most memorable trips, which was to New Zealand. And just to give you a little introduction about them, although I think most of you know them very well. They came to Newbridge about the same time that we did, about 4 years ago. And Alan started off his career as a master printer and did wonderful printing and had a printing business for many years. And when he decided to leave that, he then took on something which at the time seemed like it was the new beginning, which was to have stores of videos. And he had the wisdom of doing that at the time. He also had the wisdom of seeing that Netflix was round the corner and stopped at the right time and got out. And anyway, we're thrilled that they're both here. And Alan, we're looking forward to your talk about one of my favorite places.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. 3 years ago, our friend Judy was here and did a presentation on her 6.5-year-old sailing trip around the world. And she went a little light on New Zealand at our request. And the reason was that after their first year, they would come back, each year they would come back into the Northern Hemisphere when it was winter in the South and enjoy the summer here and then go back. And they were going back in February to New Zealand. And we joined them. And we spent 5 weeks and drove 5,000 miles in the beautiful country of New Zealand. And that was 2007. So New Zealand is about 1,600 miles, I can read it to you, southeast of Australia. It's about the size of California. Current population now is about 5,150,000. There's 20 million sheep. The population is about 70% European, 17% Maori, which are the natives. But there's only been 800 years of human history. There were no humans there before 800 years ago. And that's had an impact on certain things. So getting there, the flight from Boston to Los Angeles, and then on to Auckland was 10,000 miles, 31 hours. It was a long, long trip. We did not stay in Los Angeles. We just transferred planes. And then we returned Auckland to Melbourne, Australia, and then to Los Angeles and Boston. And that was 12,500 miles. The country is 2 separate islands. There's the North Island and the South Island. North Island and the South Island. And most of the population is on the North Island. And most of the geothermal activity is on the North Island. And most of the Maori population. The way we traveled was we had a van, a Japanese van, in which all the controls and everything were in Japanese. And it was not new. But the 4 of us traveled. We stayed in what they call backpackers, which are small little cottages and things like that. We averaged $40 a night per couple. And cooking in a communal kitchen many times when we didn't eat out. And the first place we stopped, we went walking in the morning and we got an idea of what the North Island was like. And you'll get an idea here. So things are a little active. Most of their electricity is geothermal generated. Heat that they need during the winter is all coming out of the ground. So it's a relatively efficient place to live. The first thing we did was, first of all, we understand that we were on a schedule. Most people who travel in New Zealand will rent a vehicle and will turn the vehicle in at the bottom of the North Island in Wellington, take the ferry to the South Island, and get another vehicle. We couldn't do that because we had all of our stuff in this van. So we had an appointment, and you'll see a picture of the ferry. It is not small, and you had to be there. So we had to stay on schedule. So our first visit was a Maori. You have to understand that we had two cameras. Judy, our friend Judy is here, by the way. Judy and I were shooting about 110 pictures a day, which is what the cameras would hold. And we were dumping the cameras every night onto CDs for safety, which means at the end we had somewhere around 7,000 pictures. I'm not going to show you my share of those today. These are edited, and thanks to an impressive request, I've tightened it up. You get a picture of the four of us here. Mark has since passed away, but Judy lives in Cape Cod, Woods Hole, and her daughter was here a few weeks ago, spoke for the Woodwell Climate Center. But this is what things are like. The place is active. And it looks, you see things like this, and it's just like nowhere else in the world. Yes, it's hot. So in addition to mountains and things like that, you have these beautiful hills. The place was completely volcanically created. Drive along the road and stop you. And these gorges, I didn't say gorgeous, gorges, huge crevices in the land that are just immense. We'll come back to that a little later. So from there, we made it to Wellington, which is the capital, the southern tip of the North Island. And it too, very delicate. We took the tram up.
Okay. The view of Wellington Harbor.
And we were high. But here's Judy at her best. Judy, you have to understand, would sit in the back seat of the van with, I didn't realize she was going to be here, in the back seat of the van with two Bibles, The Lonely Planet and the Guide to the Lord of the Rings. And Judy was obsessed with the Lord of the Rings. And the first sight, she was very excited. And we got to it, and it was a beautiful green field. You see, Peter Jackson had agreed with the country that when he built all the sets, that he would put everything back to normal when he was finished. P.S. When he shot The Hobbit, he made an agreement, and the country said, you will not touch anything after you've finished because it's an incredible tourist attraction. So you can go everywhere in the country and see Hobbit sites, but not Lord of the Rings. The ferry is nothing to be, is not insignificant. But we made our trip and we went to the South Island. South Island is much bigger. It has glaciers, fjords, has wine country, lots of sheep and deer, but not much in the way of people or much civilization. You get an idea, you can see the land as we were coming in. That's a house. It has no connection to anything. And this is the town of Picton, which is where the ferry comes in. And then you start to travel. And one of the first things you discover is that the bridges are one lane. And you can see by the sign that the people coming north have the right of way. So if you see a car coming, you have to let them come. When they come, then you can go through, but one car at a time. The only traffic lights in the entire country in 2007 were in Auckland. There's none anywhere else in the country. However, they have rotaries, a lot of rotaries. And I have to tell you that it was a frightening thing when Mark and I were in the front seat, and the first thing we came upon was a 2-lane rotary going the opposite direction to what we're used to. They go clockwise, we go counterclockwise. And we said, what do we do? So the first thing we hit on the North Island was wineries and a chocolate factory. The wineries are most known. That's the Marlborough wine country. If you're familiar with wines, Marlborough wines are very famous. Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Noir primarily. Very healthy growing. And that is right in the middle as far as the climate is concerned. But then all of a sudden, you see things that are from the past. This is all from the evolution of the country. Roads wind along the edge. There's no people. And you can see the snow in the mountains. Now you have to realize that this was fall. So they're skiing in the summer there. And the immensity of it is just incredible. And then you come upon the glaciers. This is the Franz Josef Glacier, and it is receding. You can see the front of it. We walked all the way up to the face of the glacier, but we weren't able to get any closer than that. They said it was dangerous. But then you would get in a car and you drive, and it's beautiful. And then you come to flat lands away from the glacier. The country just changes so fast. This is Lake Wakatipu in Queenstown. And once again, you can see up in the right corner a little road. But other than that, the only thing is at the head of the lake is Queenstown. The rest of it is uninhabited. Yes. The Maoris are native. They're from Polynesia. And they're the ones who originally populated the island 800 years ago. There's 17% of the population And now they are getting more and more part of the legislature and the government, which is good. They have their traditions, which are very important. But you get a picture of the height and the flatness of the country. This is one of Helene's favorite things. She does not like suspension bridges, especially if somebody else is walking on the bridge. But we talked about the gorges. And so this particular gorge is significant because if anybody's familiar with bungee jumping, this is where it was invented. And most of the bungees in the world are made there. One of the things they told us is a bungee is good for about 500 jumps. And they tell people, you're number 499. But I was very, very fortunate. That's not me. They asked the jumper whether they want to get their head wet or not. Based on their weight, they can control the tension on the jump, whether the head will hit the water or not. And then they let the person down, and the boat comes and picks them up. So then we went to Milford Sound. And this was an interesting experience because there had been a virtual drought for the month or so prior to when we got to this particular spot. And about 3 days before, it started to rain, and rain heavily. And they told us we were the luckiest people around because this is what you go to Milford Sound to see, is these magnificent waterfalls. But it's so windy that the water doesn't get to the ocean. It actually stops or blows sideways before it gets all the way down. It was very windy, but it was just gorgeous. Get a picture so you can see on the right-hand picture that the water isn't actually reaching then we had an interesting circumstance. Mark and I, both being boaters, on this boat that was taking us through the sound, had to go up and see the guy who was piloting it. We get up to the cockpit, and he shows us all the instruments and everything, and it's really neat. It turns out that he spends 6 months in Maine doing the same thing. But you get an idea of the height. So from here, based on Judy's fabulous navigation, she said, we have to get to this spot in the south part of the island by 3 o'clock this afternoon. So off we went. And the reason we had to go there was because the tide is out. And when the tide is out, these petrified trees show they're 3 million years old. And they have come up because of the earthquakes and everything. They have risen in the ground. And they are below the water other than at low tide. But it was magnificent to see them. And then from there, we went further south. And as my ancient GPS, I still have this thing, my ancient GPS shows, this is the second most southern point in the world, other than Cape Horn. We live at 42 degrees. This is 46 degrees. We live at 40 degrees north. This is 46 degrees south, which is like northern Canada. And to give you an idea, because of so far south, the wind blows around the globe unrestrained. So the trees grow like this. And then once you leave that area, you start to see the rest of New Zealand. You see sheep and deer. And then as you start up the coast, we're now on the western side of the South Island. You start to see beautiful expanses. The western side is the Pacific Ocean. Eastern side is the Southern Ocean. And we went to see this lighthouse. Yeah, out at the tip there, I have a close-up here of it. If you look carefully, you see that little thing on the left-hand side, that little stack of things? That's the light. The lighthouse, big thing with the Fresnel lenses and everything, that's no longer used. The light from the lighthouse is from that little stack of cylinders. From there, as we headed north, once again, we're moving up the west coast. Very flat, beautiful. The roads hug the edge of the water. There's no barriers, no shoulders. It's tight. And that's because it just rises so fast. From here, we went to what's called the Albatross Center. And it is a place that helps albatross breed. And these are birds that have a wingspan of 15 to 18 feet. And they can stay in the air for months at a time. And these were the young birds up there, exercising, enjoying the wind. It was a beautiful thing to see. And the other thing that is there is there's a penguin sanctuary. And what you do is you have to be there late in the afternoon, once again timing, and you're down in a trench with a concrete top that's about this far off the ground. So you're looking out like this, and at about 5:30 in the afternoon, the penguins come home. They've been out during the day, and they come home. They come marching up the beach. And then from there, we got a look at the Larch Castle, which was built in 1871. But that's how the British established themselves. Beautiful gardens. Yeah, that's in Christchurch. So then as we headed north, we saw another anomaly, and that's these Kanegsberg, ancient boulders created millions of years ago around lime crystals. And once again, things millions of years old, because there have been a lot of people there to damage this stuff. And as you head north, what we started to do was we started to go inland toward Mount Cook. That's the highest spot in the Southern Island. The views, the drama of it is just magnificent. There's a statue of Sir Edmund Hillary, the guy who climbed Mount Everest, who was from New Zealand. But in addition to those mountains, you have this. It's flat. One thing we did notice as we were driving was things like this. What that is it's a tree farm. They plant trees and farm them for the Japanese. So those trees will be grown to the proper height. They'll be cut and they'll be taken to Wellington and shipped to Japan because they don't have much of a source of wood. I was there, I checked it out. One of the things that we came across was, some of you know we had a sailboat in Maine for 20 years. It was a J40, and there were only 92 of them built in the 1990s. and this is one of them. It was from Australia, and we met the people. Elaine gave them our J40 hats, and they were touring New Zealand and heading back to Australia. The boat was, I was familiar with the boat. It was originally going to go around the world, and it got as far as Australia, and the people got tired. So Helene went swimming with the dolphins. None of the rest of us wanted to do that. Hector's dolphins. Once again, you see the way the land has been sheared, and there's animals everywhere. The oceans are not insignificant there. So now we finished. We have, like I said, I had over 3,500 slides by myself, so I've not shown you very many. I've shown you 107 so far. So you've seen nothing of Christchurch, which, by the way, has been severely damaged since we were there by an earthquake. But now it's time to go back to the North Island. And once we crossed to Wellington, now we're going to drive up the western side of the North Island. And we had specific places we wanted to go. But one of the things that came about was a huge storm offshore. But once again, remember where we are as far as the winds are concerned. And this was the calmest of the pictures. We're coming, this is, that was as we were coming across, I'm sorry. You could see the storm at sea. We're back to Wellington, and then we started north. And as we drove up the coast, the waves were just unbelievable. I've been out in the ocean before, I've seen the ocean. This was absolutely incredible. Two, North Island and South Island. So as we got further north, then we started to find Dawson Falls near Mount Taranaki. And once again, you start to see the effects of the geology, the huge waterfalls. Beauty of the fields, and once again the contrast with the mountains, with the snow, the glaciers, and you see this, it's just incredible. The other thing that exists in this particular area is caves. The Rukari Cave, and then the Waitanamo Glowworm Cave. You can't take any photos in the Glowworm Cave, but it was quite amazing. And then we come to another sad part of our story. We went to the Kiwi House, and I mentioned that 800 years of history. One of the factors was you have to understand that in the early days, most of the birds on the island were non-flying. They were ground birds. The British brought dogs, and they virtually wiped out that population. And in that population were the Kiwis. And they have Kiwis, actually. They've been able to breed them. Kiwis only operate at night. So when you go to this museum, it's reversed. And you go in and it's dark. And it's light during the night and dark during the day, so you can see the kiwis, but they do not fly, and it was quite interesting. Then we got back to Auckland. That's the Space Needle in Auckland. And I keep thinking of all the things we left out. Once we got to Auckland, one of the things you can do is there is an island about 25 miles offshore. About 30 years ago, the entire island erupted in a volcano. And after 20 some odd years, it has, quote, come back to life, if that's possible. And you're able to walk on the island and see the aftermath of a volcanic eruption. But what's happened is that birds come out and drop things, their droppings and things, in the former lava. And because it's rich, it grows, and you will see flowers and things in the midst of the lava. So then we're returning to Auckland, and you see the contrast of this very modern city and this 1800s custom house. So one of the things we did in Auckland was many years ago, a man took one of the sewage storage tanks, they call them, a gigantic facility, and he created the first inverted aquarium where you can walk on a conveyor or you can walk separate from it, but you are underneath the water. So all the fish and everything are above you. Now, this has since been replicated in many places around the world, but this was the first one. And then in addition to that, there is a penguin facility called an Antarctic Encounter in the same facility. And all this is in these giant former sewage tanks below the city. And there's also crustaceans. And of course, then we had dinner that night. And with all due respect to Judy, that was their home for 6.5, oh, actually more than that, about 9 years. That is Windbird, the boat that went around the world. The one in the middle. We stayed there for 2 nights. I think 2 nights. That's it, out of the whole trip. But we were on the North Island, and we're getting ready to do things on the north part of the North Island. So now we're heading north. Once again, you have these beautiful fields. Once again, we look at the GPS. Now we're 34 degrees south. We were 46 degrees south at the southern point. So that's about 1,000 miles. If you can read any of that stuff, that says how far Los Angeles is, how far the South Pole is. But the unique thing about this spot is it's called Cape Reinga. It's the northernmost spot of the country. But when you look down, you are looking at where the Southern Ocean meets the Pacific Ocean. And it's pretty violent. Boats do not go near there. It was a cloudy day, so I couldn't get a good picture. The other thing is that, once again, from volcanoes and various eruptions, huge amounts of sand move from one place to another. And on the North Island are these huge banks like this. And it's great fun for people. They rent, like we rent sleds on snow. Elaine decided she didn't want to rent anything, so just slid down. So then we went back to Whangarei, where the boat was, and they had a big party for the cruisers, the world cruisers. That was a good place for them to stay. So there were a lot of them there getting ready, now that it's beginning to be summer, to move on. And Mark was asked to be the speaker for the cruisers. So he gave his speech, and that's dinner being cooked below the ground. So from here, I realize I've left out about 80% of the trip. From here, we went to see the Kauri trees, which you may or may not heard of. Our redwoods are the tallest trees in the world. The Kauris are the biggest trees in diameter in the world. Most of them were cut down in the 1700s. And then they stopped it because they realized what was happening. Those trees were, in a sense, buried in the ground. And it's against the law to touch a kauri tree now. You can't cut it down. You can't do anything like that. But here you have these trees that are in the ground. And what they are doing is they are excavating some of those trees that are buried in the ground. And they've created this museum. To give you an idea of the immensity of these trees by some of the things you see here. And the wood itself is absolutely gorgeous. We have some bowls. You can buy all kinds of things. You can find them around the world. But they make beautiful wood fixtures. And to give you an idea of how big trees are, this tree has been cut so that there is a spiral staircase inside the tree trunk. Once again, there's a person down there. An idea of how big this piece of wood is. And you can see the bowls down in the lower left corner. That's it. Off we went.